who are new to this segment, a call for good practices was put on by the organizing committee of the virtual forum to capture and share cases that support education continuity, youth agency, and advocacy, despite of the threat of events such as COVID-19. The Virtual Caribbean Safe School Initiative Pre-Ministerial Forum, with focus on the regional review on school safety in the context of systemic risk, is considered a timely event. It is expected to capture and synthesize the plethora of dialogues on education sector response to COVID-19 pandemic that we have already taken place through multiple partners and the range of responses that the ministries of education and other partners would have implemented by the end of the 2020 hurricane season. Through the virtual CSSI Pre-Ministerial Forum, high-level delegates will define the topics to be discussed at the Third Caribbean Safe School Ministerial Forum. And that will aim to build the education sector resilience in the Caribbean region. We hope that the good practices shared today will be of relevance and interest to you in your own country. Note that there will be no Q&A in this segment, so we ask that you contact the respective presenters if you require further details or have any queries. Their email addresses can be found in the session details of this event's website. In this third segment, we will have one interview and 3 presentations around, first, from the British Virgin Islands, collaborative lesson planning. Second, the Bahamas Ministry of Education Preschool Virtual Learning Platform. Third, from St. Martin, Safe School COVID-Free. And fourth, review of home learning in Cayman Islands Government Schools during the COVID-19 pandemic. First up will be the interview with Mr. Arthur Selwood of the British Virgin Islands, who will be speaking on collaborative lesson planning. Mr. Selwood is an education officer in the Ministry of Education, Culture, Youth Affairs, Fisheries and Agriculture of the British Virgin Islands. He's also the designated school safety focal point of the BVI. In that role, he manages the information exchange between the Ministry of Education and Safe School Working Group of the CSSI on the matters of school safety. In this capacity, Mrs. Selwood presented during the first technical session last week, Tuesday. Today, we'll speak with him about collaborative lesson planning executed by the Ministry of Education in the BVI. In the case shared by Mrs. Selwood, core subject officers in the BVI were assigned to develop collaborative lesson plans during the COVID-19 lockdown in May 2020. This was done to allow teachers to contribute to producing unified lesson plans on the Google Drive platform. The core subject officers actually achieved this by creating slides and then sharing them with the teachers in each core subject, including English, mathematics, science, and social studies at each grade level. Welcome, Mr. Selwood.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to this, this forum.
Okay, Mr. Selwood, first of all, can you describe how this collaborative lesson planning process works using the example of, say, the English language subject?
Yeah, to establish the process of collaborative lesson planning, teachers were placed in groups according to their subject area in the secondary school, and in subject groups according to grade level for primary schools. If we're looking at the English for a department like the English department, the English teachers were placed in a group, and they were allowed to share the Google Drive, the slides in Google Drive. The department head would initiate the slides in terms of putting the basic information in place that is required. And that information is based on the particular objectives that are being covered. And the slides are created using the VI standards-based lesson plan template, which establishes and outlines the different the strands, the benchmarks, and all of those different things. Now, the slides are created in the Google Drive, in Google Slides, and the teachers are given the opportunity to contribute to the slides. The beauty of those slides is that the students, the teachers are able to add videos, they're able to add animations, they can add pictures as well as prose, etc. And the slides are set up in such a way where there are instructions which will enable any teacher who is using that particular lesson plan via the slides to know exactly how to proceed and what to proceed to at a given time. Those lesson plans are put in place so that they can be shared with all of the teachers in the department, and those teachers would select the particular objective that they are supposed to be imparting to the students, and they would proceed through the slides, following the instructions, etc., etc. All teachers are involved in the process of putting these lesson plans together, so that we don't have a situation where you just have a certain number of people who are doing all of the work and other people are benefiting from the process. And they're putting these slides together and having all the teachers being involved and sharing the slides with all of the teachers and giving them the opportunity to project lessons that are unified across the board. It helps the system to be in a better place in terms of the type of content, as well as the Google Slides allows many different types of media to be used, which facilitates the differentiated learning that we promote within the society.
Okay, wonderful. What were some of the challenges that you identified in the process, and what were some of the actions put in place to mitigate those challenges?
There were two major challenges. One challenge was getting the teachers to participate, getting participation, because we wanted to ensure that we didn't have, like I said a little earlier, you didn't have just a certain set of people doing all of the work. So we worked on dealing with that in that we, after creating the group of teachers, each teacher would be assigned a particular objective that they would initiate the process of putting the slides together. And then all of the teachers would be able to view the slide, and they would be able to contribute to it. But that particular teacher who has a responsibility of initiating it, they would know that they must do a certain amount of work, and each teacher would know that their turn is going to come up soon. So everybody is involved in the process. There's some people are involved in the initiating the slides, and then everybody is involved in contributing to it. And then the different persons are used at different times in order to ensure that all persons are involved. And then the second challenge that we had was accessibility and the appropriateness of sharing the information. We had to do extensive training in order to allow teachers to not only utilize and the lesson plan in the online setting, as well as in the face-to-face settings, because we're trying to encourage a hybrid setting. well, not a hybrid setting. We are trying to encourage more of a blended learning setting where the teachers are utilizing the online capabilities, whether they're face-to-face or whether they're online, because we are experiencing, it's different combinations of hybrid learning, where some students are at home and some students are in school, as well as we are encouraging blended learning going forward, and so the utilization of these slides will enable the teachers to put forward the information with different approaches, so that the differentiated information and all students with different learning styles can be addressed.
Okay, thank you very much for sharing that experience with us, Mrs. Selwood. And like you said, I'm sure going forward, it will enable more utilization of the blended learning platform, as well as catering to students with different needs. Thank you so much. Next up, you're welcome. Next up, we will have the presentation by the Bahamas Ministry of Education Preschool Virtual Learning Platform. Our presenters on this particular topic will be Mrs. Leja Burrows, Acting Assistant Director of Education, Acting Assistant Director of Education, and Mrs. Joanna Miller-Neely, Acting Education Officer. Both are from the Ministry of Education in the Bahamas, and they will be presenting on behalf of the Early Childhood Education section of the Department of Education. Mrs. Leja Burrows has responsibility for the early childhood education. She holds a master's degree in early childhood education with honors and is a 29-year veteran in the field of education. Mrs. Burrows began as a primary school teacher in Marsh Harbor, Abaco, and advanced to senior assistant at Delaport Preschool, principal of Willard Patton Preschool, education officer, senior education officer, and currently assistant director of education in early childhood education section. She is responsible for the management and supervision of government preschools, curriculum development and assessment, data collection, public relations, and the public-private preschool voucher program. Mrs. Burrows is passionate about early childhood education and ensuring that all young children in the Bahamas have the opportunity to experience high quality, developmentally appropriate preschool programs. Joining her is Mrs. Miller-Neely. She's presently employed at the preschool unit of the ministry. Apart from being an education officer, she also serves as a trainer and facilitator. Mrs. Miller-Neely holds an associate degree in early childhood education and a certificate in educational leadership, both earned from the College of the Bahamas. She has a bachelor's degree in early childhood and family studies from the University of the West Indies. She's currently pursuing her master's degree with Marconi University. Mrs. Miller-Neely believes that knowledge gained is useless unless it is shared with someone else. It is my pleasure to welcome and turn the session over to Mrs. Burrows and Mrs. Miller-Neely to present. Over to you, ladies.
Good afternoon, and thank you so much for that introduction and for having us here today. As you are aware, our region is indeed prone to hurricanes and natural disasters. In 2019, we in the Bahamas suffered a devastating blow due to Hurricane Dorian. It was this Hurricane Dorian and other natural disasters coupled with COVID-19, which brought about a greater awareness of the need for a virtual learning platform to ensure continuity in education. The government of the Bahamas was resolute in its efforts to make certain that essential services were provided or in place for our citizenry. Here is Chloe to share a little bit of information with you.
country's first and I have some information that I would love to share with you today. On the 24th of March, the Bahamas government instituted the emergency powers, COVID-19, following the country's first reported case of the coronavirus, closing schools, hotels, and most businesses. The Ministry of Education was faced with the challenge of finding a way to continue its mission of providing education and training despite the trials and uncertainty of managing a global pandemic.
And so, thank you, Chloe. Under the motto, safety first, education always, the Department of Education, in collaboration with internal and external stakeholders, galvanized and developed a strategic plan for the delivery of education in a safe and effective mode. This plan included protocols for managing a safe learning environment and the 3 models of instructional delivery to be used, which was based on the community spread and also the capacity of the facility, with the main objective being the continuity of education in a safe and healthy learning environment. Throughout the Bahamas, all levels of education from pre-primary to secondary school were to engage in face-to-face, hybrid, or remote learning as prescribed by the competent authorities, namely the Department of Public Health, the Department of Environmental Health Services, and the Ministry of Education. One of the many best practices which was initiated during the COVID-19 pandemic was the Ministry of Education's Preschool Virtual Learning Platform. This platform is located within the Ministry of Education's website virtual learning portal and is accessible to all, including preschool-age children, teachers, parents, and other individuals throughout the Bahamas. Parents of preschoolers and the students were invited to register and engage in daily learning activities, live sessions, and resources throughout the learning classroom.
Good afternoon. There are several risk factors which impacted the transition from in-person schooling to fully online learning. Firstly, the level of technological competence in both in students, teachers, and parents. Secondly, teachers were unfamiliar with virtual learning as an instructional model, as this required different strategies, resources, and instructional materials. We also became aware that there was a limited amount of indigenous digital resources that were accessible to all teachers throughout the country. Many students and teachers did not have adequate digital devices. Many homes and schools did not have reliable internet service or in some cases electricity. And some parents were unable or in some cases unwilling to assist their child with online learning. Several strategies were employed to address these risk factors. Firstly, an array of professional development and training sessions to develop basic skills in technology use, in strategies for managing a virtual classroom were held. Additionally, with the new EMIS and LMS system, data entry was also necessary. Teacher teams were established, and these teams produced resources and curriculum documents such as pacing guides and schemes. Tablets and laptops, which were already in the preschool classrooms, were distributed to students to use at home, as well as devices which were gathered through the Ministry of Education's collaboration with private sector were distributed to vulnerable students. There was an extensive school digital infrastructure upgrading exercise to ensure that schools were adequately upgraded to meet the new demand. And television programs were produced and aired on the Bahamas Learning Channel through Cable Bahamas. We also produced student packages, hard copy student packages, and these were distributed not only through the schools where parents were invited to come, but they were distributed at convenience stores and businesses in the community so that they were as accessible as possible to parents so that they can take them home for their students, for their children to complete and return to school for marking and feedback. Virtual learning is an integral aspect of the Ministry of Education's disaster risk management plan. The recent devastating weather and health disasters brought a greater awareness of the need to have an alternative system in place should the need arise again. We currently have the infrastructure, the devices, the competence for an easy transition into online learning through the virtual learning platform. Reflecting on the benefits of the Ministry of Education's virtual learning portal, we can confirm that our system has seen great development in a positive direction. There is a stronger sense of community between teachers and education stakeholders. There's been a mindset change in the way in which education is delivered. We have moved away from expecting that you must attend the physical facility in order to receive instruction, and we've moved to providing students opportunities to receive instruction wherever they are. There's also been an increase in digital resources, and these resources are now accessible to all teachers throughout the Bahamas on all islands. There is a strengthened relationship between the public and the private preschool sector through training and shared resources. And as a result of our pacing guides, we have a more standardized program throughout the country. Lessons learned. We learned that electricity, internet, and digital devices were not available to all students, and these were essential requirements for digital learning. That adequate technology infrastructure in facilities needed to be increased, that training of all stakeholders was essential, and that the new role of parents in a virtual learning environment was not an easy transition. And so these lessons learned for us will be valuable for future initiatives. Replication. We believe that this initiative can be easily replicated at other levels, other subject areas, other school systems, other countries in our region or globally. What is necessary is the human resources and the infrastructure. They are key to the successful replication of the virtual learning platform. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Burrows and Mrs. Miller-Neely. Certainly, thank you also for pointing out to everyone listening what is needed in terms of recommendations going forward to replicate this very successful model. Our next presentation is on Safe School COVID-Free and will be presented by Mr. Herbert Klassen. Mr. Herbert Klassen is the principal of the Caribbean International Academy, or CIA. He has been principal of CIA for 4 years and has been involved as a teacher, principal, and director of schools for over 40 years in 5 different countries. During this past school year, 2020 to 21, he led the gradual transition to on-campus learning in October 2020. Under his leadership, the school was able to keep all classes open from grade K through 12. The strict guidelines that were provided by the Ministry of Education were implemented and adhered to by everyone on campus. And this has resulted in a COVID-free campus this school year. It is my pleasure to welcome and turn the session over to Mr. Klassen. Over to you, Mr. Klassen.
Thank you very much for the introduction, and good afternoon to everyone. It's nice to be online and let you know how proud we are of our school, and certainly the teachers, parents. It's a team effort for this to happen. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the situation that we're in. We're a relatively small school. We're very lucky in that we have small classes, and we have an enclosed campus that's gated, and we have an entry in a number of points, but we can close the entire campus and only have entry to one particular location. With that, and with the development of strict guidelines that are followed starting at home with parents checking their kids for temperature, making sure that students are feeling well. If they're not, then they're simply asked to stay home. And parents have been wonderful that way, that they're not sending them to school if they're not feeling well. We do have a pamphlet, and I have some slides I'm going to set up for you. If this particular slide pack that I'm going to show you simply goes through some of the things that we've done to develop a campus that we believe is being successful right now. Sorry, I'm going to go back one. Being successful right now because we follow these guidelines. First of all, when students depart for school in the morning, the parents do check them to make sure they're doing well. That is, they're feeling well. When they arrive at school, we have a one-gate entry. And because originally we had students arriving at approximately the same time, it caused congestion. You can't have students arriving at the same time funneling through one gate. So we decided to have actually 3 different entry times. Our morning group starts at 8 o'clock, and they'll arrive, and there's a half-hour time lapse for the next group to come in, and then the final high school group comes in at 9 o'clock. As they enter the gate, their temperature is taken by our security and a staff member. If the temperature is below 37.5 degrees Celsius, then those students will be allowed into the school ground. They immediately wash hands with a touch-free hand washing system, and then sterilize and head to class. In class, they have their desks sterilized as well, and the process continues every single day. If they're not feeling well, as I said, we asked students to stay home, and when they do stay home, if they're ill enough to be asked to stay home for 3 days, then we ask parents to take them to the doctor, to have the doctor check them out, and in many cases have a COVID test done if necessary, if the doctor deems it necessary. We have some general guidelines for the parents that we discussed with parents through Zoom conferences. The school is, again, very fortunate in that we have enough distance for students in classes that they can distance 2 meters apart. Those families that, because we're an international school, families often come in from Holland, France, United States, Canada, Spain, some countries in South America. And as they come in, they're asked to obviously have a COVID test done. And those students that are young and the COVID test is not done, they stay at home and will learn online. We have a blended learning system. When we started in September, we had all of our students still learning online, and we phased in step by step until the end of September, when we had all students back on campus, except for those students living on the island of Anguilla, which is next door to us, a British island. Those students would come in every day and go through the French territories, then to immigration in the Dutch side, and arrive on a dock behind our school, walk up to school. That wasn't possible because Anguilla has been closed down since March of last year. Those students have been learning online. And so teachers were teaching 90% of the students in front of them, and 10% of the students were online. In that situation, students had Chromebooks, which each student has. And because this part of the Caribbean has high-speed internet with fiber optics, the system seems to work quite well for all students on the island. During lunchtime, we have, you can see here on campus, we have our cafeteria, and we would have a designated area for all students. We went to 4 different lunches so that we have a capacity that each student had a place to sit. They could take their masks off after they sit down behind the plexiglass and have lunch, which allowed them some time with the mask off. After that, they have some playtime for the younger ones in particular, but also the high school students need some time, and we have set up socially distancing games, which includes things like volleyball, some soccer, football, some basketball, but again, all where no contact is allowed. In classrooms, we also developed classrooms with plexiglass. I'm showing you some segments of a classroom. Our classes aren't as small as they appear at this particular point. Generally, we have about 15:1 average ratio, but we have a number of classes of 23, 24, especially in the high school. But still very lucky that we can socially distance. Washing hands, obviously, the most significant things are socially distancing, wearing a mask all day. And for the younger ones, aged from kindergarten to grade 3, we allowed them to wear shields, and sterilization of hands and washing regularly has kept our situation in balance, in that we haven't had COVID cases on campus. That's not to say that we haven't had COVID cases within families. Luckily enough, those families inform us and those students stay home and socially distance. We've had 4 students that have had a situation where they, in fact, did have COVID, and we caught it in time. The class teacher and a number of the students who were involved with that particular student also had COVID tests, and they were negative, so the school was able to stay open.
Mr. Klassen, we aren't seeing your slides. You're flowing very well, but if you could just make sure that you're sharing your screen, that will be helpful.
Thank you very much. My apologies. So I am going to have to go back here.
In the interest of time,
I will continue.
Yes, continue, and let's wrap it up.
Okay, thank you for that. So I will bring my own slides up for myself. So students then go directly to class after they have sterilized their hands, and they will then learn through the day. Those students that travel, we're again lucky on campus to have open air travel areas. So students will travel between classes, especially in the high school. Before they do that, every student sterilizes their desks, and when they go to the next class, the desk area has been sterilized, they wash their hands, and they're ready for the next class. Our students' desks, as I say, all have plexiglass on them. It's very unfortunate the slides that I didn't open it up to share the slides. That would have helped you see, but I think you get the idea that we have protocols in place that have, and a blended learning system in place that have allowed our campus to stay open this year. And up to this point, we've had no cases of COVID on campus. And I believe this is because it's a team holistic sort of approach that everyone concerned, from parents to students to our security at the front gate to teachers, if everyone works hard and stays with the social distancing, wearing a mask at all times and washing, then we're successful. So I think in the end, the last thing I want to say is that we do have assemblies, and all of our assemblies have been Zoom assemblies. We had a wonderful Christmas play that was put on by students and teachers. We've had a number of awards assemblies, and all of those have been done on Zoom, and it allowed parents, students to Zoom in to those assemblies and to get kudos or have an arrangement where they are recognized for the good work that they've done in classes. So thank you again. Very sorry about the slides that I wasn't able to share them, but I think you get the gist that we have been quite successful as a school in staying open, and very proud of the fact that we've done that. Hopefully we'll finish this year as a safe school, and we'll be able to reopen in August. We're going to start early, as we always do. Hopefully phasing in the next step where we are open for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Klassen. Our final presentation is a review on home learning in the Cayman Islands Government Schools during COVID-19 pandemic. Our presenter is Dr. Aidan Tumilty. Dr. Tumilty is a Senior Policy Advisor and Manager of the Inclusion Unit of the Ministry of Education in the Cayman Islands. He possesses a doctorate in Special Education Needs and Inclusion, a master's degree in Special Education Needs and Inclusion, and a bachelor's degree in Special Educational Needs and Inclusion. He has over 20 years experience working and studying in the areas of special education needs and inclusion. And it's my pleasure to welcome him and turn the session over to him. Over to you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for the warm welcome and the introduction. Hello from the Cayman Islands. Just to give you a little bit of context of where we're at the moment before I start this, we are currently COVID-free and have been COVID-free from June. So the piece that I'll be speaking to will be during the period that we did have COVID and that we experienced remote learning. But up to this point, our schools have been open and operating as normal from August. So I do appreciate we're in a very luxurious and unique position. But anyhow, here I go with our review of home learning in the Cayman Islands during the COVID pandemic. And this was something that very much came about quite quickly. Just looking at our timeline when COVID was sort of erupting around the world. We closed down on Monday, the 16th of March. All education institutions were completely closed. So remote learning was required from that point. So in these 2 weeks that were probably the 2 weeks before the Easter break, things were probably a little bit disjointed. Schools came to a close very quickly. And at that point during those 2 weeks prior to the Easter break, it very much just looked like packages that were being sent home. There wasn't really a joined up approach. But immediately after our return from the Easter break on the 15th of April, the ministry initiated a review, which is essentially an inspection that will be taking place. And this is the timeline set out for that. So that decision to distribute an inspection framework was distributed to schools on the 22nd of April. So you can see that there was a very quick response to the requirement for certain expectations that were set out within the framework that I'll share with you. Also within that, a specific timeline for when this framework and the aspects of it would be implemented, including actual observing of lessons by the inspectorate and the surveying of all stakeholders, and when that reporting would take place. And the report was published on the 12th of June. So it gave a particular detailed insight into this term 3 period that we were engaging in remote learning. So just let me take you through some of this. I am conscious that this is, there's a lot of detail within this. I may not be able to speak to it all, but feel free to contact me and have a look at the presentation in more detail when you get an opportunity. So the inspection framework, it set out 3 broad overarching schemas. Schema 1 is a strategy for home learning, and it had 9 explicit quality indicators. Schema 2 was monitoring standards, and it had 5 explicit quality indicators. And schema 3, teaching and learning, had 3 explicit quality indicators. And here's just a look at this framework, and I'll not read too much into all of these details because I do want to get through all of these slides. You can see within this schema 1, they were looking for a clear strategy, programming for all needs, exam preparation strategy, ITC support for students and staff, and how schools were going to track and monitor progress. And importantly, and a big piece of this, I felt that it was important, surveys were sent out to all stakeholders. So schema 2, briefly, just making sure that the quality indicators identified any challenges and allowing for support and improvement. And you can see within all of these quality indicators, the inspectorate was asking for evidence to back up or support or allow for scrutinizing of the extent to which the quality indicators were being met or they weren't being met. I have to say, at a professional level, at the time I was deputy principal of a school, a special school, this initially felt like a lot of added anxiety and pressure and stress to what was already a very stressful situation, particularly as a dad as well as a professional. But now in hindsight, looking at having these quality indicators, high expectations that were required, I feel we were the better for it, and we delivered a much better, higher quality of teaching and learning, that there was a huge amount of accountability in through this framework. Just moving on, this is very much a synopsis of the report that was published off the back of the inspection framework that was used and applied in all government schools. And what I would do is I would encourage you all to maybe look at this document. It's a pretty serious, in-depth document that I feel there's a lot of value in for other jurisdictions, and it's pretty well set out. So if you can just look at that, and even the recommendations that it set out for going forward, should we come to ever be in a situation where remote learning is required, be it pandemic or earthquake or hurricane, whatever that may look at, I think there's a lot of value in this document, so I encourage you all to look at it. So summary of findings, there was, and you can see that immediately after Easter, there was that prompt response in saying these are the expectations, these are the things we were actually going to inspect and review on, and that's something that from the immediate outset there was a very much a collective movement towards getting on the ball from the beginning, and I have to say that happened from week one, where children were being expected to engage fully, that platforms, particularly Seesaw, Google Classroom, Teams, they were being used in such a way to ensure we had as much attendance as possible. And I speak to the data in relation to that in a moment. Appropriate curriculum was observed to be delivered, and teachers did ensure that there was accessibility and reliability relative to the technology. I think from hearing some of my other colleagues speaking about the challenges you have and continue to have relative to technology and accessibility, we had a huge amount of ministerial support in ensuring children had access to computers, had access to internet, and the attendance rate that we had sat at around 88%, because we had such a good government response to providing all of those students who needed access to devices, that they did have that. And I'll get into the nitty-gritty of that data just when we get through these next couple of slides. As you can see, there's a lot in this. I'm not going to speak to all of these, but do please come back and look at these summary findings in your own time. A big emphasis was something we did relative to student welfare. We had the support of the Red Cross relative to mental health and the Alex Panton Foundation. And I know some of my other colleagues from the Cayman Islands have spoken to this earlier in the week in some of the other sessions. Just to move on, in relation to the data, you can see the percentage attendance that the inspectorate was able to gain in terms of the data capture that was expected. We had very high attendance. Obviously, we would like as much attendance as we could get, working towards 100%, but I feel 88%, it's a pretty impressive number considering what was happening. You'll see also within that there were still challenges around students needing access to devices. We still had 9% of our student population during this time not having access to a device, and also we'd 4% not having access to the internet. And I feel relative to some other jurisdictions that's probably an impressive number. And again, that was born out of private-public partnerships. We work with Digicel to make sure that those children who didn't have direct access to the internet, they got their little home hubs, their portable home hubs. So that ameliorated some of those challenges. Part of this, I suppose, it isn't just me saying that, you know, how well this response went, or what was good, what was bad. It was stakeholder engagement. So you can see from the 809 parents who responded to our online survey, almost 80% of these parents agreed or strongly agreed that there was good arrangements in place to support children's home learning. I'm a dad of a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old during this time, so a year 1 and a year 3, and I have to say that the daily synchronous lessons that my children were engaged in, it was particularly impressive. But thankfully, we had a home environment that allowed for that. My wife lost her job, so at one level that wasn't a good thing, but at another level, it allowed for her to manage the children at home and get them online each day. But I know for lots of parents and families, this was a massively challenging thing, and we know that remote learning is certainly nowhere near and will always be a second best to actual face-to-face learning. So students as well, there was a strong response from our students, and them also 67% strongly agreed that there was good arrangements in place to support my child's home learning, and this was from a year 11 and year 12 sample.
Dr. Tumilty, if we can just get your final comments. We have another session, so my apologies for rushing you, but we'd like to close out the session.
Well, there's a lot more slides I would like you all to look at and would encourage you to look at. I probably didn't get through anywhere near as much as I wanted to, but this is probably a good place to end in terms of students acknowledging how hard the teachers worked during this time, but that it's very much a second-rate remote learning. Is very much a second-rate provision to actual teaching in classrooms, face-to-face, children being in school. Technical problems are always going to inhibit our children's learning, and even here where we did have the devices, we did have the internet access, there was always those issues with technical problems, and it did hamper their ability to concentrate and complete tasks. And finally, and I suppose sadly in the reality of all this, students, these 11 and 12, year 11 and 12 students, feeling ill-prepared for their forthcoming examinations and the impact that that can have on our children at that present time and also going forward. So I appreciate I need to stop, and I would encourage you all to look at the other slides within this presentation.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Tumilty. And thank you to all our presenters. Apologies for a bit of the time crunch. Again, I also want to thank the audience for your time and attention. A reminder that the email addresses of each of the presenters can be found on the session details of this event's website. If you want to continue a dialogue or request slides will be posted later. They're not currently posted, but I encourage you, if you need to, you can contact each of the presenters that presented today. I hope you all have found this session and the whole Good Practices series to be valuable. And for those of you heading to technical session 5, that starts at 3 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, which is a little under 40 minutes. So thanks again to everyone. Take care and stay safe.
Thank you.